did it, when he was at Stanford, he would take a group of women, and these would be Asian American women. And he's done this with every group, so it's not just women, not just Asian Americans, he's done it with blacks, whites, everybody. But anyway, he takes a group of Asian American women, and he brings them into a classroom, and he says, "It is so wonderful to teach at Stanford because you have so many bright women." And then he does some stuff, and about 20 minutes later, he gives them a math test. They flunk the test. He takes a woman from the same cohort, and this time, instead of saying women, he says, "It's so wonderful to teach at Stanford because there's so many bright Asian Americans." Does something, gives them a test, and they ace it. First example, he primed the frame or network associated with women. They are aware unconsciously of the stereotype that women are not good at math. Their behavior conforms with that stereotype that they carry with them. The second time, he primes the stereotype of Asian Americans. And they are aware unconsciously that Asian Americans are supposed to be good at math, so they conform to that. So the unconscious is incredibly powerful. And it affects not only how we behave toward others, it affects how we, in fact, behave toward ourselves. So the goal of colorblindness then, once you recognize what's going on in the 98%, becomes again something that is not possible, and I would say it's probably not even desirable. So I want to shift now and talk about structures. And I want to say two things. One, structures are never neutral. Structures carry values, and they send messages. And two, we all live in structures. Some of the structures we live in are productive of opportunity. Some of the structures we live in create tremendous challenges for our lives. And most of us are unaware of the structures we live in. We just call it our neighborhood, our lives. We don't think about it. And these structures are also interrelated. So you don't have an inner city unless you have a suburb. They are related. And they're related in some particularly disturbing ways. In fact, I often say, once a city gets really decimated, it gets an inner city. And I always say, it reminds me of a horror film. They say, "Has anyone seen Sally?" "No, the last time I saw her, she was going to the inner city." Dropped off the face of the earth, man. And implicitly, people know that there's something bad about that. I mean, it's like, and they don't say, well, they don't have a tax base, they have failing schools, they don't have infrastructure. It's just this sort of nebulous feeling like the inner city. And they certainly don't say, well, that's where all the black folks are. Well, that's where we try to keep them, but now they're getting out to the suburbs. And they certainly don't say, this is how we structure opportunity in our society in a racialized way, which is really what's going on. So this is, and the flip side of it, in terms of, we talk about opportunity structures. Think about the structure of opportunity in your region and the racial implications of that structure. So here's my opportunity story, and you may think of your own either now or later. You can say, "Aw." Yeah, I shaved then, so I get So I grew up, shaved again. These are my parents, and my parents, like a lot of African American parents, left the South. My parents were sharecroppers, and people don't use these words, but people move generally for opportunity. Whether you move from one neighborhood to the other, or whether you move from one state to the other, people move to try to get greater opportunity for their family. So that's what my family moved, in search of opportunity, in search of a structure that would enhance the life chances of them and their children. And this is the house that we grew up in, 9 children, and I'm 6th of 9. sister still lives in the house. My mother passed away. And this is my old neighborhood. And I just want to point out that all those grassy spots, they're not parks, they're vacant lots. So you'll have a house, or two houses, then you have four vacant lots. Then you have another one, and another vacant lot. So that the whole neighborhood has become largely depopulated, which is true of a lot of areas where there's high concentrated poverty or the inner city. There's actually simply not the people density, even though there's concentrated poverty. This used to be a thriving commercial area. It's not that right now. It's an area that's largely devoid of opportunity. And this is where I grew up. And some of you will know this place as Detroit. It has over 100,000 vacant and boarded up lots. The estimation is just in terms of vacant lots, Detroit is losing over $100 million a year of lost revenue. So my sister, who still lives in Detroit, said that the mayor had decided that they weren't going to mow the lawn for any of the public facilities. And as a result of that, you have crime, and anyway, they don't have any money. Now this is the house I live in now. It's in a high opportunity area outside of Columbus, Ohio. And if you compare, again, you probably can't read this, but if you compare what's happening to folks in low opportunity areas like Detroit compared to high opportunity areas like the area I live in now called Bexley. In Detroit, less than 25% of the students finish high school on time. And the area that I live in now, not only do students graduate on time, my daughter graduated from high school, 100% of her classmates graduated from high school. 100%. And 100% went to college. Everybody in that high school went to college. Now we live in an area called Bexley, which is right next to Columbus, which doesn't have these statistics. And literally, the children in Columbus, the parents, tried to sneak their children into the Bexley school system so they can steal a good education. And literally have the police rounding them up, saying, no, you can't have a good education. You belong in that school district where only 50% of the students are graduating. And any student who can get into Bexley and stay in there will graduate and go to college, whether they're black, Latino, or otherwise. And the parents know that. They can't afford to live in Bexley, so they try to, come up with an address at Adam's house or somebody's house to get the kids into the Bexley schools. They are trying to energize and engage in an opportunity structure that will enhance their children's lives. In Detroit, more than 60% of the men will spend time in jail. You're more likely to go to jail than to graduate from high school. Of course, the community I live in, most people don't even drive by jails. If they get stopped, maybe having had too much to drink, the police, whom they know by first name, more likely to take them home. And it goes on. It's not safe. My father, I'm going to Detroit in about a week. My father's turning 90 years old. I'm doing some work for AARP, and there's all this stuff. They're trying to, AARP has discovered race. It's like, wow, there's some old people who are not white. What's that about? So they're deciding, okay, maybe we should look at what these people are, their lives. They're not the same lives as many of the white colleagues. So they asked us to help them look at this. And they have this formula. If you want to be old and healthy, you should either exercise at least 3 times a week, moderate exercise, and you should have some kind of part-time activity, whether it's work or volunteering outside the house. So that's their prescription. That's AARP's prescription for old people. So we looked at, we started looking at old people like my dad, turning 90. And I said, so Dad, do you go for walks? And he literally says, it is not safe for an elderly person to be walking on the streets in Detroit any time of day. And my sister, who's not so elderly, says, it's not safe for anybody to be walking in Detroit any time of day. So the idea of exercising becomes much more of a difficult thing. We don't normally think of exercising as a racialized thing. You know, so you do or you don't. And I have a grandnephew. When he was born in Detroit, my niece was constantly fighting with him. And he was overweight at 5 years old. Overweight at 6 years old. And she was hiding food and he was finding it. And they were fighting about it. And she was turning off the television, he was turning it on. He was bored. And she was taking him to doctors and this, that, and the other. She finally moved. She left Detroit and moved to a suburb in Atlanta. My grandnephew slimmed down immediately, stopped eating, stopped looking for food. He's now an all-state basketball player and a straight-A student. The difference was she took him from a low-opportunity area where he could not go outside and exercise to an area where the kids swam and play basketball and baseball, and she didn't have to do anything. She has the same income. She's still African-American. Everything else is the same, except she picked a neighborhood that is a high-opportunity neighborhood. And she's a single mom. So one way we can talk about the structure of opportunity, we can think about it as an escalator. You're trying to get to the 3rd floor. If you're in a high-opportunity area, the escalator is going up. All you have to do is stand there, and you'll probably get to the 3rd floor. There will always be a few exceptional people who will manage to fall off the escalator. But most people on that escalator will get to the 3rd floor. Right next to them is an escalator that's going down. Now, again, there will always be a few exceptional people who will run up a down escalator, who will come out of Detroit or Cleveland or some other area where the opportunity structure is very negative and succeed. Unfortunately, we have a narrative about that. We say, well, you know, it can't be the neighborhood because, you know, Jackie Robinson made it, you know, and, or Barack Obama made it, or John Powell made it. And so the success of those who can run up and down the escalator becomes an excuse not to do anything to the structure. And that's a mistake because most of us cannot run up and down the escalator. That's simply not appropriate. We have to pay attention to how these structures are how people are situated in relationship to these structures. And part of the thing we do at Current Institute is actually we literally map out opportunity structures and then on top of that, indicate where populations are so you can see if people have access to opportunity or not. So opportunity is racialized, it's spatialized, and now it's globalized. And we need to be very conscious of how we link or de-link folks to opportunity. Now, notice, talking about opportunity, I've said very little about racism. So I'm not focusing on whether or not someone intended for this to happen, although sometimes they did, but whether they intended or not. If you go to Detroit schools, your chances of graduating, and your chances of graduating and going to college, and your chances of graduating and going to college and graduating from college is extremely rare. Most of the students in Detroit don't go to college. Those who do go to college, most of them are inadequately prepared even if they get to college. That's not true for students who go to school in the community I live in right now.